We are in the final days of a hidden cycle, and what is not investigated now may become a trap in the next steps. Yes, even in contracts, alliances, and material exchanges. God is calling you to open your eyes and see beyond the surface. Hidden fees, seductive promises, misaligned partnerships. There is shadow energy disguised as opportunity. And this is why, in this video, I will reveal what is being hidden from you and why your guides are whispering for you to stop and observe before deciding. How the Scorpionic portal of truth can give you a spiritual vision that few have the courage to access. And what is the only action the chosen ones must take before this cycle advances? You have until the end of this cycle to realign what was agreed to in haste, in fear, or in emotional scarcity. Because for those who are awakened, making the same mistakes is no longer permitted as before. Something is going to happen, and the signs have already begun. Stay with me until the end, because this message may be the dividing line between deception and liberation. You say you want more financial power, but you still sign without reading the fine print. There's a deep contradiction in the way we deal with money. We crave abundance, yet overlook the very places where control is quietly lost. Hidden fees, auto-renewals, silent clauses tucked away in contracts we didn't read. In this crescent moon under Scorpio, the invitation is clear. True financial strength isn't loud. It hides in the details, and so do the leaks. Many people mistake action for control. They work harder, hustle more, invest blindly. But what if real prosperity starts not with bold moves, but with discreet corrections? That subscription you forgot to cancel. That clause you didn't understand but agreed to. That free trial that started costing you months ago. What if these are not minor lapses, but echoes of a deeper pattern? Scorpio energy doesn't tolerate superficiality. It urges you to investigate. What are you agreeing to without truly consenting? What are you signing away while convincing yourself it's not a big deal? It's not just about money. It's about power and how easily we give it up. Now is the time to pause and revisit your financial commitments. Read the terms. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Cancel what drains you. Renegotiate what no longer makes sense. If something feels off, don't ignore it. That discomfort is not paranoia, it's wisdom. Prosperity begins when you reclaim the spaces where you were previously passive. The question is no longer, how can I earn more? It's, where am I losing what I already have, simply because I'm not paying attention? You dream of financial expansion, yet you ignore the shadows where your power slips away. There's a silent cost in every unchecked agreement. Not just the dollars lost, but the autonomy you forfeit. Every time you nod without reading, every time you just trust the system, every time you tell yourself it's probably fine, you trade awareness for convenience. But money thrives where attention lives. And this lunar phase asks, are you watching closely? True wealth doesn't begin in how much you earn. It begins in how much you see. Maybe you've noticed it, a subtle gut feeling when something feels off in a deal, a bill that keeps increasing, a contract you signed in a rush and now regret. These aren't small things. They're signals. And Scorpio doesn't whisper, it reveals. Now is not the time for denial. It's a time to sharpen your perception. What small drains are quietly weakening your financial flow? What silent agreements are still binding you to outdated roles, prices, or promises? How many harmless auto debits are silently stacking up in the background? This is your invitation to take back the pen. Revisit what you've signed. Ask to renegotiate what no longer serves. Clarify every term before you commit. This isn't paranoia, it's maturity. There's power in awareness, strength in questioning, freedom in renegotiation. Most people think financial growth happens in moments of big income, but often it's the quiet decisions, the ones no one sees, that shape your entire trajectory. Maybe you're not stuck. Maybe you've just never read the fine print of your own story. Sometimes the true cost isn't in the number, it's in what you gave away by not looking. In the world of money, illusions are expensive. We sign things we don't read, agree to terms we don't fully understand, and trust systems we haven't questioned. Why? Because we crave ease. We assume someone else has already done the hard thinking. But ease without awareness is where power quietly disappears. The moon in Scorpio doesn't deal in surface answers. It invites us into the shadows, the places where discomfort lives, but truth begins. This lunation doesn't ask you to become paranoid. It asks you to become precise, to read what others skip, to see what others overlook, to make financial choices not from fear, but from informed clarity. Think of the contracts you've signed, with companies, with people, with yourself. Where have you stayed silent because questioning felt too difficult? Where have you paid a price, financially or emotionally, for the sake of peace? This phase asks for courage, the kind that sits across the table and says, "I'd like to understand this before I agree." The kind that pauses before clicking accept. The kind that walks away from a deal that looks good, but feels wrong. You're not here to follow the crowd. You're here to navigate the deep waters, where true wealth lives. Not just in digits, but in discernment. Not just in gain, but in groundedness. Let this be the turning point where you stop chasing more and start commanding better. Let this be the chapter where you realize that understanding the terms isn't boring, it's powerful. Because when you stop giving your attention away, you start reclaiming your wealth. What you don't see still costs you, but what you bravely uncover, that's where freedom begins. Losing money isn't always about bad luck. Sometimes, it's about what you didn't dare to question. There's a quiet moment, the second before you say yes, sign, accept, swipe. A voice whispers, "Is this really safe?" But you move fast. You trust the surface. You assume things are in your favor. And when the bill arrives, or the loss becomes visible, you call it bad luck. But deep down, you know it wasn't just that. This moon phase pulls back the curtain. Scorpio doesn't deal in illusions. It reveals. It investigates. It shows you the details you were trained to ignore: fine print, silent fees, auto-renewals, unspoken obligations. It invites you to stop saying, "It just happened," and start asking, "Where did I stop paying attention?" Not because guilt helps, but because awareness protects. Maybe you've been taught that money should flow easily, that checking every line or clause is a sign of scarcity. But that's a lie. True abundance doesn't come from pretending things will work out. It comes from seeing things clearly and having the courage to act when something doesn't add up. You don't need to become suspicious of everything, but you do need to become conscious. To look, to ask, to pause. That pause alone might save you more than any bonus ever could. So take a deep breath. Open that document again. Revisit that agreement. Question that payment. Not to over-control, but to reclaim what's yours: your discernment, your power, your presence. You're not here to move blindly through financial terrain. You're here to know what you're walking into, and walk in with your eyes wide open. You keep calling it bad luck, but what if it's just unspoken permission for things to slip through? When it comes to money, most people fear what's loud: the debt collector, the crisis, the sudden loss. But what drains you the most isn't loud. It's subtle, quiet agreements, assumed roles, monthly charges you forgot to cancel, promises you made with a smile but now regret. And yet, you stay. You comply. You hope it all works itself out. This moon in Scorpio doesn't let it slide. It illuminates the patterns where your silence becomes expensive, the conversations avoided, the deals never reviewed, the discomfort you swallow so you don't have to face conflict. But that discomfort has a price. Maybe it started years ago. A family belief that questioning money makes you greedy. A trauma where speaking up ended badly. Or maybe you're just tired of fighting for every inch. So you surrender by default, not to peace, but to avoidance. Yet Scorpio doesn't ask you to shout. It asks you to investigate, to observe, to take your power back in the details, without rage, but with presence. Start small. Open that bank statement you've been avoiding. Revisit the contract you barely read. Talk about the silent debt in your relationship, emotional or financial. Name what has been unspoken. Your clarity will sting at first. That's normal. Truth always burns a little before it liberates. But on the other side of that fire, freedom, the kind that isn't loud or boastful, but felt deeply in your nervous system. The kind that no longer waits for luck, it acts from awareness. And when you stop labeling financial losses as fate, you begin to realize your wealth doesn't depend on chance. It depends on your eyes being open. Some losses don't happen overnight. They happen little by little in the spaces where your attention drifts. You might look at your bank account and feel a sense of confusion. Where did it all go? But money rarely disappears in one dramatic blow. More often, it dissolves slowly in recurring charges, unnoticed subscriptions, unspoken agreements, and unconscious spending that feels harmless until it isn't. This is the kind of power Scorpio asks you to reclaim, not by panic, but by precision. Maybe you've blamed the economy. Maybe you've told yourself, it's just a bad phase. And maybe that's true in part. But beneath that explanation, there might be something deeper, an emotional relationship with money that remains in the shadows, a reluctance to open that spreadsheet, a fear of being judged for what you spent, a belief that you're not good with numbers. So why bother trying? But avoidance has a cost. This moon phase doesn't demand perfection. It asks for presence, for the courage to look at your finances not with shame, but with curiosity, not to punish yourself, but to understand where your power is leaking. Check your statements, not just for fraud, but for patterns. Ask yourself if that monthly fee reflects who you are now. Renegotiate what no longer makes sense. Be willing to say, this worked before, but I've outgrown it. And beyond the numbers, investigate the emotional contracts too. Are you financially supporting someone out of guilt? Are you agreeing to things just to avoid a difficult conversation? Are you saying yes when you mean, I'm not sure? These are the invisible threads that bind your abundance. Money isn't just a resource. It's a mirror. And under the light of this moon, that mirror doesn't lie. But if you're willing to look closely, to really see, you might realize that reclaiming your financial power is less about making more and more about no longer leaking what you already have. You speak of freedom, but what truly holds you back may not be visible in your bank account. It may be hiding in a silent agreement you've never questioned. There are financial chains that don't make noise. They don't scream debt or flash overdraft. Instead, they appear as silent obligations, the loan you co-signed and now regret, the monthly payment for something that no longer serves you, the promise you made to support someone emotionally and financially, even when it drained you. These aren't just numbers. They're energetic contracts. And Scorpio energy doesn't look away from what's buried. It invites you to investigate what you've been tolerating in silence. This moon phase presses you to ask, what financial commitments are you keeping out of fear of confrontation? What recurring cost do you justify only because it's not that much? What agreement did you make when you were in survival mode, but now no longer reflects who you are? Sometimes, the weight isn't in the amount, it's in the avoidance. You're still paying for something you've emotionally outgrown. You're still bound by guilt, by habit, by fear of disappointing someone. And it's that weight, not the expense, that blocks your financial expansion. This is your invitation to pause and unearth the contracts you've never spoken about, to renegotiate what once felt necessary, to say no more, not with anger, but with clarity. Scorpio doesn't flinch in the face of truth. It dives into the dark to reclaim power. And that's what this moment is about. Not cutting ties impulsively, but revisiting agreements with new eyes. Because true financial freedom isn't just about making more. It's about no longer being silently bound to what you never consciously chose. Sometimes, what we call financial stability is just the fear of shaking the structure we once built in survival mode. You say you want freedom, to choose, to breathe, to create without the pressure of old debts or silent demands. But a deeper look reveals You're still trapped in agreements you no longer question. Maybe it's a financial partnership based on outdated roles. Maybe it's the auto-renewal you never stopped. Maybe it's the monthly payment to keep a dream alive that no longer feels like yours. These aren't just contracts. They're echoes of your past self, the one who made decisions without the clarity you now carry. The energy of this moon invites excavation. Scorpio isn't afraid to look beneath the surface, and neither should you be. What looks like a harmless charge might be a symbol of fear to confront someone. What seems like a necessary expense may actually be a commitment made out of guilt. What appears as part of being an adult might be a burden inherited, not chosen. When you avoid these details, they grow roots. They settle in your budget, your calendar, your nervous system. You call it normal. But deep down, you feel it. Something needs to shift. This isn't about becoming reckless. It's about becoming honest. You don't need to burn it all down. You just need to bring it to the light. Review the papers. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Speak the truth of what no longer works. It's not betrayal, it's evolution. Because real prosperity doesn't come only from how much you make. It comes from how bravely you revisit what you once said yes to and finally give yourself permission to say no. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from avoidance, and that silence often lives in your finances. You carry dreams of freedom, talk about the life you want, and even set goals. Yet, quietly, you remain bound to promises no longer aligned with your present self. A payment here, a subscription there, an old debt you never renegotiated. Each unspoken agreement is a thread tying you to a version of you that played safe. Not because you were weak, but because you were trying to survive. But you're not in survival mode anymore. You've grown. You see things more clearly now. And yet, old contracts linger, not just on paper, but energetically. They live in the anxiety before checking your bank balance, in the hesitation before making an investment in yourself, in the fatigue that whispers, "Not yet," every time you try to change. This moon phase doesn't ask you to break everything apart. It asks you to look, with eyes open, with courage. Scorpio energy reveals what's been hidden, but not to scare you, to free you. Start by naming what weighs you down. Is it an outdated loan you've never challenged? A business partner you avoid confronting? A family agreement you feel guilt into? Financial silence is rarely neutral. It either keeps you safe or keeps you stuck. Dare to renegotiate, not only the numbers, but the power dynamics behind them. What was once necessary may now be optional. What was once agreement may now be surrender. Prosperity begins when you decide to stop sacrificing your truth in the name of peace. Sometimes, reclaiming your financial power is not about earning more. It's about no longer paying the price of silence. You've learned your lesson the hard way. A deal that sounded fair turned into a trap. A shiny opportunity led to regret. That clause you skipped over? It had a cost. But here's the truth. Being tricked doesn't make you foolish. It makes you experienced. Scorpio's influence doesn't just sting, it sharpens. And this lunar phase brings the rare chance to use what once hurt as a compass for what protects. If pain left you cautious, now it can make you wise. You're not the same person who signed that agreement, trusted that pitch, or nodded along out of fear. You know better, and knowing better is power. This isn't about staying guarded. It's about staying aware. It's about pausing before saying yes. About reading the fine print. About asking questions that once felt uncomfortable, like, what happens if this goes wrong? Or, why is this number hidden? These aren't signs of mistrust. They're signs of maturity. Financial traps aren't always loud. They often wear the mask of urgency or the sweet voice of convenience. But you don't owe anyone your speed. You owe yourself clarity. So look again. At the loan terms you never fully reviewed. At the subscriptions that auto-renew in the background. At the handshake deals you've never put in writing. Review. Renegotiate. Reclaim. The scars of the past weren't meant to scare you away from money. They were meant to teach you how to hold it with more discernment. There's a difference between being afraid of falling again and refusing to walk with your eyes closed. You can move forward now, not despite what you've been through, but because of it. You've fallen into traps before. You've seen the polished promises that turned out to be cages, the terms that sounded fair until you lived them. But now, under this lunar phase in Scorpio, you're not here to repeat. You're here to reclaim. There's power in pausing, in rereading the contract, in questioning the urgency, in understanding that no financial decision is truly neutral. It either expands your freedom or erodes it slowly, behind closed doors. This is the moment to acknowledge where you've been too quick to trust. Not to blame yourself, but to awaken. The fine print matters. The late fees matter. The automatic renewals, the unspoken assumptions, the handshake deals that lack boundaries, they all have energy. They either serve your growth or drain your resources. You might not be able to change the past, but you can absolutely interrupt the cycle. You can go back to that deal and renegotiate. You can cancel what no longer aligns. You can ask questions that once felt intimidating. Clarity is your leverage now. Scorpio energy doesn't operate on the surface. It goes deep, behind the numbers, beneath the politeness, into the energetic exchange. What are you giving? What are you receiving? Is it equal? Is it honest? If something feels murky, don't dismiss it. Investigate. If something's costing you more than it gives, you have the right to close the loop. You don't have to stay loyal to what once seemed like a good idea. You've been through enough to know real prosperity isn't flashy. It's grounded, thoughtful, quietly powerful, and most of all, it's yours to protect. You don't have to stay where you were misled. Just because someone te enganu financierament uma vez, ou várias, isso não define sua capacidade de se proteger daqui para frente. You've grown sharper, more intuitive. And this time, your awareness walks into the room before your signature hits the page. Scorpio doesn't ask for revenge. It invites clarity. It offers the rare gift of X-ray vision, letting you see beyond surface offers into the contracts behind the smiles. It gives you pause before you click accept on yet another silent agreement that slowly chips away at your autonomy. You're allowed to stop, to ask questions, to revisit terms, to say, I need more time before I commit. That's not weakness. That's power reclaimed. If your past includes missteps with money, that doesn't make you bad with finances. It makes you someone who's learning, someone who's paying attention now. Those mistakes, they hold gold. They taught you how to recognize the red flags you once ignored. They taught you to stop trading your peace for speed. This lunar phase is here to help you rewrite your contract with yourself. One where your financial decisions are rooted in self-respect, not desperation. One where you read the fine print because you value your energy. One where you stop letting urgency trick you into scarcity. Let this be the chapter where you trust your instincts more than promises. Where you see through charm and into intention. Where you learn to walk away when something doesn't align, not out of fear, but from deep self-knowing. You don't owe anyone blind trust. You owe yourself discernment. Real prosperity doesn't begin with public success. It begins in the quiet, in the decisions you make when no one's watching. While the world celebrates flashy achievements, a Scorpio's wisdom lies in what remains unseen. The integrity of your financial intentions, the clarity of your planning, and the courage to face the parts of your money story that still live in the dark. There's power in learning where your resources go when you're not paying attention. Not just the dollars, but the energy behind them. The subscriptions you forgot to cancel. The small purchases that chip away at your goals. The unspoken fear that makes you say yes when your gut says no. Money is not just about numbers. It's about consciousness. And this lunar cycle offers the perfect moment to look beneath the surface. Where are you spending from anxiety instead of alignment? Where are you negotiating your worth out of fear of seeming too much? What you track, you transform. What you question, you reclaim. You don't need to control every detail, but you do need to stop pretending those details don't matter. The clauses, The interest rates, the timing, all of it tells a story about what you tolerate and what you're ready to change. Your next breakthrough might not come from earning more, but from honoring what you already have with more presence. It might come from renegotiating an old debt with honesty, or from simply looking at your accounts without flinching. That's where true prosperity begins, not in grand gestures, but in silent acts of awareness. Let this be the moment you start treating your money like an ally, not a mystery. It already holds power. The question is, are you holding it back or holding it with intention? There's a kind of wealth that doesn't show up in your bank account, at least not right away. It's the kind that's built in silence, behind spreadsheets, in early conversations with advisors, during quiet moments of courage when you finally say, I want to understand what's really happening with my money. Prosperity begins in places no one claps for. Not when you make a big purchase, not when you show off results, but when you're alone, choosing not to ignore another small charge, reading the fine print before you sign, or asking yourself the hardest question, why am I avoiding this? There's nothing glamorous about reviewing clauses. There's no applause for canceling that automatic renewal. But those decisions, those micro movements, tell the universe, I'm ready to stop leaking energy. I'm ready to take responsibility not just for what I earn, but for how I hold it. You were never meant to build a future on blurry terms. As Scorpio teaches, true power is precise. And in this phase, you're being asked to look under the surface. What rules are you playing by that you never agreed to? What fees are you paying in silence, financial and emotional, just to avoid confrontation? Sometimes we call it spiritual surrender, but it's actually avoidance dressed up as faith. Real alignment means being brave enough to look, question, and choose again, even when it's uncomfortable. So no, prosperity isn't just about saving. It's about investigating, planning, asking, renegotiating what no longer honors your value. It's not about controlling every coin. It's about treating each one like it matters. The money you're building now carries your signature. Make sure it's one you'll be proud of when the numbers catch up to the energy you're putting behind them.